Okay, welcome to our last series of future-proofing your education and career. It's been an excellent experience over the course of the last month, or actually the month of May, where we've covered topics including international development, business, healthcare, and basically now we're going to shift over to the topic that's close to my heart, which is the legal field. By way of background, again, as you may know at this point, my name is Hamad Zahawi. I'm a lawyer. I graduated from UC Berkeley Law School. I also went to UCLA, Harvard, and the University of Cambridge in England, doing work in international relations, public administration, and so forth. I'm also the CEO of Right Track Admissions and want to be able to expand what we know in my network and share that with you in terms of the admissions process, the education process, and in terms of professional development. So today with us, we have two amazing guests, both close friends of mine, people I have studied with, worked with, and continue to work with. And I will now present them to you without further ado. Okay, so let's jump straight into it. Maybe we can start with you, Natasha.
Sure. Thank you, Hamada, so much for having me on this platform. This is actually very exciting. It's my first live stream, I have to be honest. My name is Natasha Akta. I am based in New York, and I have a private practice, and I predominantly advise clients in a variety of industries, but most in particular, the arts, private enterprise, and the nonprofit sectors.
Thank you, Natasha. And I'm hoping I'm not going to keep screwing this up between Natasha and Natalia. I didn't do that on purpose, but let's hear from you, Natalia.
Great. Yes, my name is Natalia M, and I am currently the Public Policy Director for Airbnb's new business called Experiences. So not where you stay, but what you do when you're on vacation. Prior to that, I was at the White House, at the Department of Labor, Department of Justice, ACLU, and I started my career in private practice at Morrison & Foerster.
Fantastic. And so as you guys can see, in terms of the audience, I try to bring together folks that have covered a whole spectrum of the legal, of different legal options and opportunities for you, which is why the topic today is the many facets of law and the future of advocacy. So without further ado, let's kind of delve into the career paths, the education paths of both these incredible individuals, and let's see what we get out of it. So basically, let's hear it from you, Natasha, in terms of your career path, or excuse me, your education path, where you started as in undergrad, how that led you into the field of law, and then we'll do the same with you, Natalia.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. So I actually, when I was growing up, I was always very interested in international affairs. It's just something that resonated with me. And so when it came time to apply for schools, you know, DC was absolutely where I wanted to be. And the George Washington University actually really got me with their tagline in their promotional materials. It was something happens here. And I loved that because I always wanted something that was a more proactive experience. So, you know, I applied, I got in, and I studied international affairs at GW. And then when it came time to graduate, I wasn't actually quite sure what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted something in the realm of international affairs, but I also, I wasn't comfortable with bureaucracy. And so I really wanted to find a way I could participate in this thing that I was so interested in, but also be effective in that field. And I ended up landing a position as a paralegal at this boutique law firm based in DC with these brilliant attorneys, Harvard, Princeton, Yale educated, just like you, Hamada. And I got to do international law work underneath one of the managing partners, and I fell in love with it. I mean, I just, you know, it's a slow process, but I felt that I finally found a way to do what I wanted to do, but in a way that had teeth. And so I held that position for about a year, and then I applied for law school, and I got into the George Washington University Law School. And I have to say that that was probably one of the best experiences in my life. I mean, just in terms of mental stimuli, just thinking about the law from an academic standpoint really makes you question everything. And it's very, very compelling, at least to me.
Fantastic. And we're going to go in detail about your legal, about your legal education career and what you learned from GW and how you'll be able to apply those lessons in terms of your legal career afterwards. But maybe you can hear from Natalia, because I know that your path was a little bit circuitous, getting you into the legal field. I think it's fascinating. So I think our audience would very much benefit from hearing from you as well on that front.
Sure. So I consider myself an accidental lawyer. I didn't go to law school really intending to be a lawyer, if you can believe that. I actually was more interested in getting a PhD when I graduated from undergrad. So I went from a psych undergrad to working at UCSF, where I worked for a health psychologist there. And we were looking at issues related to depression and anxiety and chronic health issues. So I ended up publishing a few papers with him and the team that I worked with, fully intending to get my PhD in psychology. But along that route was very much pulled into the law because of the ability to change policy as a lawyer. And so I knew that I wanted to work on change, but I really wanted to do it at a mass scale. And I saw, the law school path as the one being able to get me where I wanted to go. So I was actually admitted to a joint degree program, and my advisor on the psychology side said, why don't you start with law school, give it 2 years, and if you still want to come and do the PhD, you can come and do the PhD. So I started with 2 years of law school at UC Berkeley, and similar to Natasha, it's not the typical experience I think that you hear about, which is, sort of the paper chase, look to your left, look to your right, one of you won't be here. Berkeley Law was, again, similarly, like one of the most stimulating educational experiences I had. I made a ton of really good friends and connections. I had amazing experiences. And I started finding that through clinics, and we'll get into this later, I'm sure, I was really able to start doing the type of work that I had envisioned for myself, and finding that I probably didn't need to do 5 more years of school to get there. And so what I ended up saying after those 2 years to my psychology advisor was, thank you, but I think I've probably found my path, and I'm glad I did, because I think it really did lead me to the type of career that I couldn't even have imagined graduating from undergrad.
So when you made a decision, Natalia, to almost dump the PhD portion of the degree, it was basically after 2 years of, I think you're saying, of law school, and then you realize that this 3-year experience should suffice in terms of your own education and what you wanted to get out of it. I mean, does that sound fair? Like, when did you make that decision?
Yeah, I think my advisor, PhD advisor, had a better sense than I did of how this was going to go. He'd advised a few students through a joint degree program. And I don't know if maybe he saw it even before I did, but he explicitly said, I want you to start 2 years at Berkeley if that's where you want to be. And let's revisit your decision to come for the PhD. And I think, one of the things too is, if you're in your mid-20s, which I was, early to mid-20s, I think it is difficult to see sort of what path may, lay ahead for you. And I had a fuzzy vision of what I wanted to do, and being able to sort of think through what are the steps that I need to get there. I wasn't sure, and I don't think there is necessarily one path. But I think once I started on that road in law school, it became pretty clear that the law school education was probably going to be sufficient for me to be able to not only get out in the world and do the type of work that I wanted to do, but also be trained for it.
Fascinating. And that's something that I know I faced personally when I started at law school at UC Berkeley, again, by way of background, since I feel like I can finally join this conversation. My last couple, I was not in health, and I was in the business world, but in terms of your legal education, personally, after I graduated with a history degree and a minor in political science, I felt like the only path for me available was the legal field per se. And when I got into law school, I have to admit, I personally did not want to just, I personally did not want to simply, I felt like law in itself and my first year experience was, it was tough. Obviously, Natalie, I think we were, I don't know, you graduated 08 from Berkeley?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we graduated the same year, but I started a year before you.
That's right.
Is taking a year out and going to Cambridge and doing my first master's in international relations, something I'd always wanted to do. And I thought it would be complementary. Now, unlike the psych PhD, which I believe is what, a 5-year degree?
It's a 5-year degree, yeah.
And were you going to do it at Berkeley, or were you doing it, where were you planning to do it?
I was going to do it at a different university. So I think there were, at the time I applied, 3 universities that allowed for a joint PhD JD program. I was accepted to that university's program, but said, I really want to go to UC Berkeley Law if I got in. And so I went for my interview for the PhD. I found out I was accepted, but I said, if I come home and there's an envelope waiting for me from UC Berkeley, because I lived in the Bay Area at the time and I really wanted to stay, I said, would you consider allowing me to go there instead? And then he said, sure. And sure enough, literally when I got home, there was an envelope in the mail for me from UC Berkeley with my admission. And I said, well, I have to stay. So I think fate probably intervened for me, which I am very grateful for. But yeah, it was at a different program, and that probably was a reason why also that I didn't do the PhD, because it wasn't integrated. It was separate, and I would have had to move and do all of that. And I think I just wasn't interested in going 5 more years. And interestingly, you'll know who it is, but I won't say her name, but she was a classmate of ours, and she had actually done the same program that I had intended to do. And she had graduated from the PhD portion and then decided to go PhD first and then Berkeley second, right, for the law degree. And she said, don't bother. So I'm very grateful that I found her, because I think she probably, as much as I love psychology, and I think, both my parents are PhDs in psych, and there's parts of me that miss having had that experience. Looking back, I'm glad I actually went forward into the working world as opposed to staying 5 more years back in school.
Yeah, and that's a big decision. Natasha, do you ever have a second guesses about whether you wanted to also pursue a concurrent degree, or were you full on with law?
At the time I was full on with law, and really I couldn't imagine anything else that I thought I wanted to do or study. And I will say, had I known at the time what I know now, I probably would have done a concurrent degree just to get an MBA, just because of what I do right now. I think the bodies of knowledge are really complementary. But frankly, I really don't regret it. I mean, I wouldn't have gotten an MBA and not gotten a JD. The JD is absolutely the foundation for me.
Got it. And I'll say this, I'm just looking up online. I did know this before, but I'll show you guys. The top majors that people apply to into law school. I'm not talking about the concurrent degrees, but the top majors are history, business, English, philosophy, political science. Again, what are the common denominators here? They're all writing intensive. Economics, art, humanities. There's your psychology right there. I'm not shocked at all, given the fact that there's so much psychology that goes into the legal field, whether it's your own psychology or the psychology of those you represent or those who are your adversaries, so to speak. Math, which is always interesting in the sciences, a lot of those end up going into more the technical aspect of law that goes into intellectual property rights and so forth. I think you remember Natalia in UC Berkeley, which is one of the preeminent institutions in intellectual property. A lot of them had engineering backgrounds, math backgrounds, science backgrounds, and so forth. So it's always interesting to see that. And you say, Natasha, that you were thinking about an MBA. Is there a reason now? And again, this is more for the listeners of why, because I know the JD MBA program, again, at Berkeley, I think they were about, and correct me if I'm wrong, Natalia, maybe you know this offhand, maybe like 5 or 6 concurrent degrees between Haas and Berkeley Law. But I mean, why are you thinking about that now, Natasha, in retrospect, that would have been instructive for you?
Well, just because of the nature of my practice at this point, I got to a place where what I do is I advise businesses, right? So a lot of my clients are entrepreneurs. Some of them are already established entities. And if you really want to be effective in advising them on certain transactions, you have to understand the underlying business concepts. They're not separate. And, you know, for me, I learned it on the job. I did my own reading. I figured it out for myself. But frankly, had I been able to look forward into the looking glass, I would have absolutely have just taken the courses and saved myself, I think, a lot of learning by fire and training by fire, which is great because you learn it in a way that is, I think, more ingrained and intuitive. But I would have saved myself some time. Is the long and the short of it.
Right, and I know even I toyed with the idea of going back and doing an MBA. I actually even applied for an MBA while I in my 30s. It was way too expensive. It was outrageous for me at the time. And like Natalia said, there is that decision you have to make about whether you're willing to take some time away from your current career path to go back to school. For me, all my secondary degrees, the 2 masters I did, were both 1 year. So I thought that was almost forgivable to take a year out, but to take more, especially as you go through further in your career path, it's a pretty big decision, not only in terms of the finances you're going to give up in your current job, but the money you're going to spend, and then the risk factor of whether that's really going to help you move in the next level of your career. And was there any other degree now that you look in retrospect, Natalia, that you wish you could have done, or further studies you wish you could have done in terms of law?
You know, I actually didn't stop. So, I mean, there have been times when I've taken extension courses and things like that. And so there were, I think earlier on when I didn't feel I had the same type of expertise and I still felt a bit unsure of myself in the legal profession, there were times that I wanted to go back and sort of shore up my skills and get another degree to maybe feel a little bit more confident. And I had a mentor at the time who just said, you know, I think you're probably okay. I think you probably just need to continue to work. If you really want to do additional learning, do an extension course, do something like that to improve your skills. But ultimately, I think he was right that I didn't need to go back to school. I think it's sort of that idea of like I just needed more time in the job. And now having, you know, 10 years to look back on things, you really do learn. I mean, law school teaches you how to think. And I think it varies by sort of graduate degree, but certainly law school, I mean, that this piece of it is very true. It teaches you how to think. And so that application piece, I mean, law used to be an apprenticeship model and still can be in some instances, right? In California, it's still permissible to get your law degree by apprenticeship. And so I think the value of actually getting into the work, particularly with law, is especially important. And there were times when I wanted to lean out of practice and go, you know, sort of do more of maybe an academic thing. And I've had other mentors say to me, no, you have to practice for a period of time. And, you know, I've been in the courtroom. I've done a lot of things that traditional lawyers do, and I'm so grateful for having had litigation experience, for having had trial experience, because even though I do policy work now, I very much understand what it is to do litigation or what it is to actually present in front of a judge. And those are skills that inform the way that I think about policy. So I'm grateful for the mentors who have told me, just keep, you know, kind of trudging along in your job. You will get the type of, you know, mastery and expertise that you're looking for. It just takes time. And also for those who told me, you know, just even when it's hard and you're feeling unsure, just stay in it. And make sure you get that traditional legal experience so that you can talk, you know, to a lawyer, even if you're doing policy or even if you end up doing something else in life in the way that they understand and you understand their work, because it will make you more effective later on.
And surprisingly, at the Kennedy School, when I was doing my master's in public administration, there were few lawyers there, surprisingly, even though a lot of the policymakers in Capitol Hill, whether Congress people or senators, quite a few of them have law degrees. And I think there is definitely that interconnection. And I'm sure that's the same with you, Natasha, when you look at it, when you look at working with some of your clients, and we'll get more into that. there are like macro issues and policy related issues that you as a lawyer can understand that makes it a very smooth transition into that process. I know it was for me when I was even working in the US government and looking at things from a public policy perspective. It is something that is very frequently taught to us when we're in law school. Maybe tell me, like, Natasha, two main takeaways that you thought were very important for you in your experience at law school, and then we'll do the same with you, Natalia.
Two main takeaways. I would say know the details. Facts are everything, right? I mean, that's probably number one. You can understand legal theory, but legal theory really turns upon underlying fact. And so having a good grasp of what that is going to really be helpful for you, regardless of what kind of law you practice, whether you're at trial or litigation, in which case facts are up front and center, or if you're just advising a client on how to structure their business. You really need to understand their business. You really need to understand their position and have a good, solid grasp of the facts so that you can advise properly and then really help them level up and take their business to, you know, whatever they want to take it to. The other thing that I would say was a really important lesson I learned, and I guess this is a softer lesson. You're dealing with people. Law is about humanity and it's about governance. I mean, the reason why so many politicians have law degrees and the reason why, you know, you showed that top 10 list of people who tend to go in that direction, it makes sense. There is not just an overlap. When you go and you study the law, you really are sitting there and you're questioning, okay, well, these are the rules. Why are these the rules? What is the underlying morality? What are the virtues? What are the values? What are we talking about here? Really, like, why do we want to operate in this way as opposed to that way when you have a series of options available to you?
Right.
And I think, you know, this kind of goes back to Natalia's point. When law school teaches you about how to think, you start to question everything. And it's not as black and white. It's not just about having a rule. It's about understanding why the rule exists and then executing further beyond that rule.
Yeah, and I remember that was something that we're going to talk about towards the end of this conversation, which is the main takeaways. And I know one of your main takeaways related to the human connection. Natalia, what do you think about that? Any of your main takeaways from law school that you?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's pretty profound, frankly. And I think that is the reason why once I started law school, I felt like the psychology was probably underappreciated, but infused throughout, right? The practice of law. And I think, you know, maybe from sort of in the shoes of a, you know, first, second, third year law student, work really hard. And I think that's one of the things that law school teaches you. It takes you to a different level that you didn't think you could accomplish. And I think that's something that's going to serve you throughout your careers, is that you didn't think you could kind of get to that next level. But when you push yourself hard enough, you realize that you can, and it will always propel you to the next rung of whatever, you know, your career ladder is. I think the other piece is, you know, try different things, try clinics, try, you know, law review or journal or whatever it is that's interesting to you, because this is your opportunity to really sample what's out there. And lastly, your career starts in law school. And I don't think I fully appreciated this. And thankfully, we went to such a kind law school, Hamada, that, you know, making friends and connections and relationships with professors came naturally because it was such a wonderful community. But you will be surprised. People who have very entrenched positions in law school, and, you know, they are adamantly believing in one thing and would never believe in something else, that may soften and change, and you know, people grow and mature as they, you know, 10 years, 15 years after law school. And so those folks who, you know, maybe went to the corporate sector seem so very different from the people who are going to the public interest sector. But guess what? You know, the people who are in the public interest sector are going to be doing, partnering on their, you know, pro bono briefs with the person who's at the corporate law, you know, group. And so it all comes full circle, and those connections you make with your classmates are going to last your entire career. And so treat those relationships with care, and, they'll nurture and grow organically. But it's not 3 years; it's a lifetime that you're going to be spending with these people.
Absolutely. I mean, that's probably one of the most important aspects of law school, right? I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself. Your career starts in law school, and I don't think people know that when they go into it. They don't realize that your professors are going to be a huge asset in getting you to that next position and placing you in the right area within the realm of law. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. And to your point, Natalia, I think it's important that those relationships develop organically, because insincere relationships, they don't work in any capacity.
Yeah, and I know that it's funny. I had two different lives when I entered school in two different periods of my life. When I entered law school, I was 24. When I entered the Kennedy School, I was 35. At 24, the relationships tend to be somewhat organic, right? You're not really thinking about your career. You're kind of stumbling through. You're trying to go through this miserable experience of first year. In many ways, as Natalia said, I think Berkeley Law, I was a pass, no pass, essentially. So it was quite forgiving to us, as opposed to other schools which are on the grading system. But I remember when I got into Harvard and everybody was trying to grab coffee with everybody else, looking at their backgrounds and their profiles and seeing where they can help them move from one part of their career to the next. And that disingenuous, inauthentic mechanism of making friends, I think really did a disservice to some people. And I think the authenticity that comes into that networking piece, and I wouldn't even call it networking, it's community building. I know, and Natasha, I'll ask you about this, I know Natalia as well, because I was the editor-in-chief of a journal on the law school. I think we were both on the law review at some point. I know you were involved in a lot of stuff on campus. I'm sure so were you, Natasha. And I think from that experience, people saw that you had the mechanism and were willing to go to bat for you later on in your career, because they knew that you were somebody that could be relied on, that you weren't flaky, that you were resourceful, that you could execute in law school, then you certainly can execute in a legal career. And I think that's an important factor. One thing that you mentioned quite often, Natalia, and I'm sure, Natasha, you have the same, because you also mentioned about professors, is the concept of mentorship. And I want to kind of close out the law school piece of this with that concept. I will say this for myself. I sadly, even though I've been in school 4 times and I've had a bunch of different legal paths and career paths, I haven't really found one mentor. And that's to my regret. I mean, if I look back at it, and I still look back at it, I did not have a really solid mentor. I felt like I was very fluid going through. There's an art in mentorship. There's an art in finding a good mentor and somebody that's with you. Maybe I can start with you, Natasha. Did you have a mentor in law school, or before or after now, and how has that helped you?
I don't think you ever, run out of mentors in life. I think you just find new ones depending on where you happen to be and what you need. I can't say that I ever had one specific mentor who was my one person who sponsored me throughout my schooling and my career. I would say I had several who assisted me in different areas of my life. Specifically when it comes to law school, when I was in law school, I had, there are 2 in particular that I think of that come to mind, and I absolutely love them. One was a gentleman by the name of Professor Ralph Steinhardt, who was my international relations professor, and I worshiped the ground that he walked on, and we had just such a wonderful relationship. And I would come to his office hours not with any particular question, but just to be able to sit and spend time with him, and he would always just be this fountain of advice and guidance. And he really was very, very helpful in advising me on how to pursue my passion, how to harness my passion, and how to be effective moving forward in my life. The other is actually someone who, to this day, I still text on like maybe a weekly basis, if not more. I mean, he is a practicing attorney. So he was teaching at the time at my university. It was his first class. It was International Introduction to International Islamic Finance Law. Fascinating class. This man used to literally fly in from Dubai specifically to teach this class on the weekends. And I was so excited to be able to study under him. And we just naturally ended up developing a friendship through our commonalities that to this day still runs through. And anytime I ever find myself in a position where I need to, get backup or I need some sort of legal insights on something, I just pick up the phone, send him a voice note, send him a text, and he's still very much there for me. So yeah, these things, they don't expire, and you will always find new mentors as you move forward in life.
I think that's very profound, in that as you go through different phases, some mentors are be able to provide you with more input at that phase of your life, and then other mentors will be able to provide you at later phases in your career. What about you, Natalia? I know that you've had some amazing mentors as well. Some that that I've seen you. I think there was an article or some blog piece or something that was on the internet about a gentleman that I think that had mentored you, and then you ended up interviewing him or something to that effect.
Yeah. We did it for a LinkedIn broadcast at one point. But if I could start with, actually, it was law school clinic director who I considered my first mentor in the law, and it was really meaningful to me because she was probably the first woman of color whom I'd met in person, and I had already been in law school for maybe a year and a half when I met her, but it was the first time I actually saw myself in someone else who wanted to do the thing that I wanted, who was doing the thing that I wanted to do. And it was such a meaningful encounter to me. And again, somebody whom I still text and, call on to this day. And I think it is so important, this idea of representation, and also being able to seek out people whom you have, a kinship with, whether it's because of, a shared interest or passion in the law. And in that moment, I think it really made it so that I had a newfound confidence in myself and ability to take myself more seriously in what I said that I wanted to do. I think I'd been saying it, and then it became very real the minute that I met her. And so I ended up working in that law school clinic. And the mentor whom you're referencing, I actually worked for him my second year summer at the law firm. And we were working on a case together, and I was, assigned to some horrible document review in my office over the course of the summer. And I'd be there till 11 o'clock at night because I wanted to get it just right. And I had figured something out in the case. And you know what? Another good lesson, his assistant, I hounded her relentlessly to get coffee with him because I wanted to share this revelation that I had in the case. And so finally his assistant, Karen, she made it happen. And we sat down for coffee. And I remember, he was kind of drinking his coffee, eating his, pastry or whatever. And I think he just expected there to be absolutely nothing meaningful coming out of my mouth. And all of a sudden I told him what I had found in the case, and he said, "What?" And the next thing he did is he brought me to the client meeting and he let me talk, which is very unprecedented for a summer associate. And from then on, he just kept me, in all of his cases. When I came back to work for the firm, he made sure I had really good work. When he left for Washington, D.C. to become part of the Obama administration, he eventually took me to D.C. with him. And so it has been an incredible journey. And going back to, something that was very organic, again, it was a relationship that was very much built on, doing work together, and also just really being able to find somebody who saw more potential in me than I had seen in myself. And so he constantly pushed me further, made sure that my writing was even better than, I thought it could be, and also taught me to work harder than I ever thought I could. And I'm so grateful to this day for the training that I received from him, but also the never-ending boost of confidence I get whenever I give him a call and say, I have a question or an issue or something that I just want to, talk over, or, just being able to share a photo of my, my family with him, and the type of long-lasting relationship that's been. So it is an incredible thing if you're able to find somebody. But I think the thing is, there are different ways to make connections with people, and find a mentor who's at your school now. Find somebody who is at your job. It doesn't have to be a lifelong sort of relationship. It can be something that sort of helps you carry through whatever period of time that you're in. But one thing that I did with both of them is I started calling them mentor. And so they just kind of had to mentor me because they didn't have a choice. So definitely just go be bold. And if you find somebody that you really have a connection with, let them know. Don't be shy about it. And eventually they'll come around and mentor you.
Yeah. I call my mentor Yoda, and he gets a kick out of it. So it works.
Okay. I see ingratiation is actually a good thing to do for mentors to get them on board. So I wanted to quickly ask you guys very briefly, because I want to make sure that we cover the career path as well. And we got this question right now from one of our viewers, which was about jobs that you attain over the summer. You mentioned that, Natalia. I know for me, I was extremely fortunate in law school in that I got a summer gig my first summer. I then took a year out, and I still parlayed that first summer gig to become my second pseudo summer gig. And then my third summer, which was my second year, which is the most important year, to get a summer gig, I was able to get one, which I then ended up splitting between international relations in Switzerland and also Islamic finance, Middle Eastern finance in New York, legal work. And then I came back and then got a position, which both Natalia and I graduated in the worst economic time. I think, Natasha, you graduated just as the economy was picking up in 2011, right?
I mean, I did. I graduated in 2011, but the crash of 2008 was devastating for my law school experience, because
especially for the summers, especially, right?
There was nothing there. I mean, it was probably the worst time in the world to go to law school. I mean, again, I don't regret it by any means. I'm so grateful for the experience, but I went in 2008, and summer associate positions are very, very important. They set you on a particular career path. And unfortunately, when I was in school, because of the economic situation, a lot of the law firms had completely cut their summer programs.
Right, that's right.
And, if you don't get into that summer program, then you're not really considered a candidate for a first year. And it has all of this trickle-down effect. They effectively just kind of skipped those 3 years. Right. So by the time I graduated in 2011, big law was kind of inaccessible because you hadn't had those summer associate positions. They weren't even really looking at you. And so, I had to get creative. I ended up using my summers actually to just further my education. And I did 2 really wonderful programs. I did 1 year, I did a program at the Sorbonne, which was international comparative business law. Phenomenal experience, phenomenal teachers. It was, everything that I had hoped it would be. The other one was actually at Oxford University. It was International Human Rights Law program. That was probably, to this day, the highlight of my educational experience in any format and in any regard, because it really was not just about the law. It brought in individuals with all sorts of backgrounds, people who were in law schools, people who were practicing attorneys, people who were in the development field, working at the UN, in the military. And so you had this cataclysm of just all of these different viewpoints and voices on this issue that was very, very enriching. And I just used those 2 things as a launch pad when I finally did get out there in the world.
And Natalia, I know that you said you summered at I was at Morrison Foerster.
Mm-hmm.
You guys as the first position there, or one of the positions there, and you parlayed that summer gig into a full-time position. And then let's transition with you. You went from Morrison Foerster. You worked there for I think about close to 2 years, and then you moved into the ACLU. Tell me quickly about that transition from an AM50, an American. What are known as the top bracket law firms, into the nonprofit space, into the government space, and to where you are now.
Sure. So when I started at Morrison and Foerster, I don't think I had imagined myself going to big law, but it became clear that the training was going to be superior there. And I'm so grateful that I was able to have that opportunity. my heart has always been in social change. And so the opportunity at the ACLU came up, and it felt like I needed to, sort of leap for it to see, what direction I wanted to take my career in. And it was wonderful to be able to do that work and really be able to see, the inside of the nonprofit sector with really high caliber attorneys. Ultimately, my mentor, whom I worked for at Morrison and Foerster, ended up working for the Obama administration, and so I left the ACLU to go work with him at the Department of Justice. And I think being able to round out, that sort of phase of my career, I think that for me, working in the federal government was kind of the best of all worlds, right? You worked with incredibly high caliber attorneys on issues that were quite literally in the New York Times headlines on a daily basis. And you were really being able to, work at sort of scale in terms of impact. And I'm sure, Hamadi, you felt the same way when you were working in the federal government as well. And so, I really cherished that time that I had there. And I was, I liked it so much that I went and did sort of a second tour of duty at the Department of Labor. So I went to work for Tom Perez, who was at the Department of Justice when I was there. He became the Secretary of Labor, and I was fortunate enough to have an opportunity to work in his front office, and then was able to finish out my experience in the Obama administration at the White House, which was a real privilege. So I really do think that, if there are opportunities, if you're sort of socially justice minded, to consider those opportunities in government as well, because there's an incredible impact that you can make, and really phenomenal and very incredibly intelligent and hardworking attorneys that you'll encounter if you do.
Yeah, and I want to get to your final position, but let me ask you quickly, Natasha, get us to kind of where you are just prior to creating your practice, the NCA group. Kind of tell us that path, because I feel Natalia had a really interesting experience in the fact that you've gone almost different legal paths in and of themselves that people would have retired in, right? Whether it's the private law, whether it's the ACLU in the nonprofit sector, each one of these are a means to an end and an end to the means in and of themselves. Much like you, I started in private practice. I then kind of went more into the entrepreneurial space, then back into government, and now I'm back in the entrepreneurial space. And to be honest, I'm still figuring it out. I took the path of guessing certain resistance, and I've been fortunate to have a lot of different experiences in that way. And Natasha, you also didn't do a traditional. You didn't follow Natasha Natalia's and my step in the fact that you didn't go to a law firm. I think immediately thereafter, did you? And then I think from there you went into more of kind of creating and forging your own path within the space that you're in, that you're still in now. Tell us maybe a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I definitely had a very unconventional, career trajectory. So I would say yes and no to your question about having had the law firm experience, because I did not have the law firm experience as an attorney. But when I started after undergrad, I was working at that law firm that I had previously mentioned earlier, and I didn't quit when I got into law school. I actually continued working for them. So I actually went to law school in the evenings for the first 2 years, and then converted my third year so that I could finish, within 3 years. But so I effectively had 3 years of working at a firm and really getting in the trenches, being behind the scenes. And because we were a boutique law firm, a lot of the work, even though I was doing paralegal work, a lot of the work that I was doing was very, very much entrenched in the details. I mean, they really didn't hold back on our assignments, which I'm forever grateful for, because I learned so much. And without that experience, there's no way that I would have had the capacity to start my own practice and do my own thing. Because till this day, I still reference back, okay, well, how was it done back then? What did we do? What were the important things? What do I remember from the way the attorneys were progressing and moving forward? And it's always in the back of my mind. But so, kind of getting back to my career path. So I worked at the firm. I left so that I can complete my third year. I graduated, again, in a very uncomfortable economic situation. Things were getting better, but they were not yet better. And a lot of the law schools were really, really hurting. So my first position out of law school was actually a judicial fellowship at DC Superior for one of the judges there, just to kind of explore, exactly like Natalia was saying, explore what the options were, because I was, kind of shut out from big law at the time because I wasn't able to get into the summer associate program. So even though that was where I had originally intended to go, and that was the path that I had set my sights on at the beginning of law school, I realized very quickly that that was just not going to be an option for me. So I was very much exploring what else was out there. So I did the judicial fellowship, and then I ended up very randomly serving as in-house counsel to a startup renewable energy company that was based in the UK. And in that position, it was only for a year before, unfortunately, that company went under. In that position, I really held kind of this liaison role where I was working with larger outside firms. And so by extension, I was learning from those attorneys who were already in practice. Granted, I was the client, but I had the legal background. So I was really absorbing as much as I could, just watching them in action and getting the experience kind of from that perspective. And then when that company folded, I had an existential career moment. I was looking at all the options that were out there, and nothing was really resonating with me. And in this time when I was trying to figure out what my next step was going to be, two major, I think, influences kind of combined in order to lead me to where I am. One was that since I was 20, I've always been very actively involved in nonprofits. It's always been a passion of mine. It's something that I think is incredibly important for everyone to pursue, but service matters to me. And so I've always tried to be very free and giving with my time and my energy and efforts in that regard. And so I had inadvertently built this very, very large network that I was able to rely on and lean on. The other thing that was coming up was, as I was trying to figure things out, people within my network would keep coming to me and say, I have a question about this. Could you, just read over this contract? I would love your thoughts. What are you thinking about this? I want to do X, Y, and Z. And one day it dawned on me, why don't I just institutionalize this? Like, why don't I just put up the shingle and see what happens? Because I'm finding a space here. There's clearly a need, and people are coming. So why don't I do this professionally on my own? And the first 3 years were probably the most difficult of my entire life. There was a lot of, well, no, you should go get that experience. You should really go and work for a firm and do it the right way, do it the traditional way, because you need that gold star of approval. And in my mind, I heard that, but I kind of sat there and I said to myself, look, like, as long as I keep learning, as long as I do my job well, and I hold myself to the highest possible standard, I will gain that experience by continuing to show up over time. Granted, I had to give my work away for free for a very long time when I was starting, just to build up the credibility and the trust that I needed for people to then come to me and say, okay, well, you did a great job on this. I'm going to actually hire you now because you've already proved your trustworthiness. I'm going to hire you. And also, more than that, I'm going to refer you out to people. And those honest referrals are the most powerful thing. And just over time, organically, I was able to hold the line and then push the line. And now, knock on wood, I have a practice that I'm actually quite proud of.
So in that regard, let me quickly shift over. I know I wanted to kind of finish up with just one other point from you, Natalia. You're now at Airbnb. Tell me a little bit about that experience at Airbnb.
Sure. So I worked on a project at the White House where it was a pledge that several corporations were taking around equal pay. And I was able to talk with several different companies in the course of working on getting sign-on for that pledge. And one company really stuck out to me, and it was Airbnb. And I was just incredibly impressed by their mission, which is to belong anywhere. The way that they approached the pledge was just incredibly thoughtful. And the people whom they sent to represent the business, just, I felt like if I ever were to work in the corporate sector, this would probably be the place for me. And so coming out of the administration, obviously there was a change from in leadership for after the election, and so I decided that I did want to make the jump to the corporate sector, and specifically to Airbnb, because of the experience that I had with them. So I pretty aggressively pursued a job opportunity with them, and thankfully was able to join the company, and am now leading public policy, like I said, for their new business, which is Experiences. And so it's been a completely, new set of skills that I've had to learn about, product terminology. And, I found myself working in tech, which I had never imagined that I would. But again, sort of that law school training that really teaches you how to think, how to ask the right questions, has been invaluable to me. And I do love what I do now. And I again would not have predicted that, especially even coming out of law school, that I would be where I am now. But find that I'm still making a positive impact through the work that we do, and the sort of broader community that Airbnb supports through its hosts. And so I really think that, this is, again, just a wonderful experience. And it is kind of fun to change it up every couple of years and challenge yourself and learn something new. And so I don't know what the next sort of leap be, but I'm sure it's going to be fun. It's been a fun sort of road so far.
Fantastic. And obviously I have friends of mine who swear by the experience portion of Airbnb. Yeah, I mean, these guys,
really fun.
Who literally seeks it out and does it in all different countries. Obviously now with the COVID crisis, things are changing. And I think that's
online.
actually,
we have online experiences. So,
and that's what leads us to my next part, which I'm going to go really quickly because I know I want to be mindful of the time, which is just the concept of future proofing, usually built into technology, but really can also apply for careers and education. And the idea of upskilling, cross-functionality, design thinking, and staying relevant, marketable, and adaptable, which is exactly what both of you guys keep harping on and keep talking about. So without further ado, I want to kind of bring us home to the last bit of this presentation, which is really just what are the main takeaways. And I think from what I've gathered from our discussion, the main takeaways, and I will add to that as well as in terms of the mentorship piece, but that's taking a lot of different classes, trying a lot of different things, engaging the clinics. I know, Natalia, you said that quite a few times. I know that the next one, the summer positions, very, very important, whether it's professional positions or even academic positions like you did, Natasha, going to England and going to France for further education, taking on those leadership positions in the academic environment and within that on-campus environment to really hone in those skills and build what is and most important in the career, which we start with talking about relationships are everything. Natasha, those were what led you to where you are. That's what has given you your constant stream of business. I know you don't advertise per se, and a lot of the business that comes to you does come from the word of mouth and the work that you've done and the connections and the networking that you have achieved over the last X amount of years. The same with you, Natalia, which is again the same thing, that you, from each position you went, wasn't hapstance. You weren't looking for these jobs on Indeed or through career portals. You are hearing about them, experiencing them in the job setting, and being able to parlay those positions with the people you knew from one position, from one career path to the next. And then finally, I think something that both you guys keep talking about, whether it's taking extension classes, Natasha, you said about just constantly keep learning, especially from a tech perspective. Right now, Natalia got thrown into the deep end, having to learn the tech perspective of what you're doing. Natasha, the same thing with a lot of the businesses that you work on in terms of the startups. A lot of it has tech pieces and tech components that you have to get up to speed on to be able to adequately advise, to build that business acumen and the tech acumen, which is called digital literacy, to be able to effectively advise your clients. So I think these are the main takeaways. Maybe take a minute, each of you guys, before we have to sign off. Tell us a little bit about, or any input on anything I may have missed on the future proofing and the law and the legal career in terms of your experiences. Maybe we'll start with you, Natalia, because I know that you're gonna have to jump off soon.
Sure. I would just say, one of the things too is just don't be intimidated. I think all of this is true with regard to, being able to get the right educational opportunities and continue to strive and learn. And I think one of the big things, though, is that a lot of people have a hard time seeing themselves in the settings that they're in, whether, feeling like you're out of place when you're in law school, or that, you didn't see yourself in a specific role, even though you're in that role in your career. And just keep forging ahead. You will get where you want to be, and it will all kind of fall into place eventually for you, and you'll achieve that sort of confidence and composure and that feeling of being an expert. You will get there, but it's not going to come right away, and it's going to take work, and you actually have to work on that piece just as hard as you would work on your education. And so make sure that you're nurturing that part of yourself that really allows for you to grow into that image of the person that you want to be in your professional life and in your civic life, and in a holistically. So be patient with yourself, let yourself fall down, pick yourself back up, reach out for help when you need it, but you will get there. And I think the first step is really just being able to know that you're capable of getting into that school that you dream about, because it will set you on the career that you want for the rest of your life.
Fantastic. Natasha, any parting thoughts?
Yeah, I completely agree with everything Natalia just said. I would say be open to whatever comes your way, because you don't know where things are going to lead. And really, all experiences are good experience. And the foundation is always going to be your education. It's something that will create the base off of which you can build, mountains, castles, whatever you want to build. It's all yours to do, but it will all happen on the basis of your education. So enjoy it. Don't be intimidated by it. It is about learning, about indulging your curiosity, and that's a beautiful thing. It's not just about performance. And just to kind of add on what Natalia said, you will never stop learning. This is a lifelong thing, and it is something that will stay with you forever. So constantly read, constantly keep, taking on extension courses. It is, just essential for your long-term success and just fun in life.
And I'll add to that. I learned of a term yesterday, which was curiosity quotient, which is another emotional quotient, intelligence quotient. There's a curiosity quotient, a CQ. And I think both of you guys have that. I think all three of us share that, which is the constant desire to be curious and to learn from that curiosity, to push you to learn more and keep learning and keep exploring. So without further ado, guys, thank you so much, both of you, for joining us today. I want to be mindful of both your times, and I am so grateful for having both of you on. I think it's been very instructive for future law students, those who are considering the legal career, those who are in their legal career, those who are further along their legal career, that can say, if you feel like you're in a dead end, if you feel like there is only one path in law, that is not true. There's multiple and many facets of the legal field. We're seeing it right here. This is just a small sampling of it. So definitely go out there and explore. Thank you both for joining us today on this webinar.
Thank you, Hamada.
Thank you, Hamada.
Thank you, guys. And with that, I want to quickly just sign off with what we're going to be doing going forward, which is we have another series coming up. We wrapped up our future proofing series for the month, and we're moving into the future of the admissions process, or the admissions series, especially given what's going on in COVID, all the tumultuous environment that we're seeing right now in the world. It's extremely important that you stay abreast and knowledgeable of what's going on in that perspective. So we're going to be covering a myriad of different parts of the application process. We're going to start with the application process, talk about standardized testing, as well as talk about the concept of what education looks like and how to pick the right schools that would really be able to augment and push forward your desires. So please tune in. We start next month with the future of the admissions season, or the series that will start next month, every Wednesday, again, same time, same place, LinkedIn and Facebook, our Facebook account for Right Track Admissions. So thank you very much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you guys next month, and be safe, stay sane, and stay connected. Thank you.